What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS5 jailbreak news update. We've got a pretty significant piece of news here to cover in this video, and that is the release of the lib Hijacker by Astrelsky earlier this week. Now, this is finally going to be a method, hopefully, of running Homebrew on our PS5s. This is what's been teased about for a while now from people like Zeko and Nullpointer who have talked about this, but we finally have the initial release. Now, it's not capable of running Homebrew just yet. I think there's still more developments that are required here to get it to that stage, but this is the first significant step towards this. Basically, a temporary solution of running Homebrew and doing more on the PS5 than what we can currently do with the current exploits from firmware 3.0 up to 4.51. And this will allow us to do that without a hypervisor bypass, without a hypervisor exploit. So pretty awesome stuff right there. Now, I haven't heard a ton of information here about this from various different sources, but I did get some information from Astrelsky himself. So first of all, I was wondering, basically how this works. How is this somehow able to give us the ability to run Homebrew on our PS5? So it basically works by writing shellcode into the Redis server. There's a Redis server running on the PS5. There was a payload a while back that would allow you to remotely connect to it. But this basically writes shellcode into the Redis server and redirects the control flow to it, uses that shellcode to spawn a new Redis server, races the creation of the new process, and writes an infinite sleep loop at the entry point so an elf can be loaded into it. So that's pretty much how it works. So it basically results in a daemon process, which is essentially running as a background process that can execute remote code sent on port 9027, basically like an elf loader that's just running in the background all the time. And apparently this technique is also known as a process hollowing attack. If we look up the definition of that on whatis.com, so it says process hollowing is a security exploit in which an attacker removes code in an executable file and replaces it with malicious code. The process hollowing attack is used by hackers to cause an otherwise legitimate process to execute malicious code. Now, in this case, obviously, it's being used on the PS5 to hijack a process on the PS5, and instead of executing malicious code, it's being used to execute, remote code, Homebrew code, essentially, custom elf files and stuff that you're sending over the network. So another question I had is, why is this better, this elf loader that's running in the background as a daemon process? What makes that better than the current elf loaders that we have from, Spectre and John Tornblum and Astrelsky and their exploit implementations? They all have elf loaders included. So why is this necessarily, better? Or why are you able to do more with this than you can with the current elf loaders? And the answer to that question is that it's not more powerful, but it benefits from being a daemon process that's always running and is not confined to the bounds of the WebKit or the BDJ disk player application like the elf loaders from our current exploits from John Tornblum, Spectre, and of course Astrelsky. And this also allows us to read and write almost anywhere in userland, so the userland memory space, regardless of any memory protections. And from that point, you can do things like patch shellcore, start a game process and take over it before it starts, maybe make trainers, and whatever else we can come up with, essentially. So it's definitely, a significant step up from what we've had currently. Okay, so I'll give you guys a little example of how this actually works. Obviously, I'll do a proper full in-depth tutorial once we have something substantial that we can actually use, but obviously there's nothing really available yet, just a proof of concept. So basically what you want to do is have an exploit that you can run on your PS4, whether it's the Blu-ray drive exploit, like the one I'm going to run here from John Tornblum. That seems to be the one that people are recommending that you use. But supposedly it should work with Spectre's exploit with the WebKit and maybe Astrelsky's with the WebKit as well, which I have videos on too. So anyway, I'm going to use the Blu-ray drive exploit for this one. So all we're going to do is obviously make sure we have our PS5's IP address. So if we take a look here, my IP address is 192.168.1.209. So all we're going to do here is run the modified Blu-ray disc with the exploit on there from John Tornblum, which has the elf loader on it. So we press X to start, and it's going to try and jailbreak the PS4. There we go, successful. It says elf loader running on port 9020. So if we switch back over to our computer here, we have the PS5 proof of concept. So I believe I got this one from Nullpointer, but you can also, I'll leave a link to it in the description, of course. So all we're going to do here, we'll do this PS5, we'll call this PS5 PoC. And then we'll extract the files into that folder, and then we should be good to go. So What you'll notice in here, inside the files and the payloads, there's two payloads. So there's the spawner.elf, and that's the actual hijacker payload itself. So that has to be sent first, and that's to be sent through the normal elf loader. So it gets sent through the normal elf loader, your normal exploit, like any other payload. And then what it will do is hijack the Redis process and create its own, kind of elf loader, if you will, in the background as a background process. And it'll be listening on port 9027 so that you can then send this test elf payload to it instead of the normal elf loader. And if it executes it without any errors, then you know it works. So that's essentially how we actually test it here. So what we're going to do first of all is get this set up. So if I go ahead and edit the sendelf.py in my Notepad++, I'm just going to change the host to the IP address of my PS5 right there and save it. That's the only change you need to do there. I also take the elf file out here and basically copy it, and I copy it out to the same location as the Python script, and then I go ahead and edit this elf.bat, and again we can say run anyway. It doesn't matter because this is just a bat file and we're only editing it, we're not actually running it right now. So I don't know why Windows bothers with that message, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and type in our IP address, and then we'll change the file path to just the file name instead. So the testelf.elf, and we'll go ahead and hit save. So now that's ready to inject that payload. Okay, so now we're going to run the PS5 proof of concept.exe. So go ahead and run this. And then all we need to do is type in the IP address of our PS5. So 1.209. And then the port number is going to be 9020 because we're injecting it using the normal elf loader on our exploit first of all. So all we're going to do is hit the spawner button, and that will send the spawner payload. So we'll hit that button, wait a few seconds for it to get sent. And there we go, successful. So that's now sent that process. Now to see if this is actually working, what we can do is actually exit out of the Blu-ray disc right here and go back to the home menu. If you're familiar with running any of these exploits like Spectre's WebKit exploit on the PS5 or Slairs Gorvy's one on the PS5 or John Tornblum's with the disc player, as soon as you exit the disc player app or you exit the browser, the elf loader is no longer running. You could not send another payload to 9020 now that we've exited out of the disc player and we're back in the home screen, or if you exit the WebKit, you cannot send another payload. However, we have this hijacker payload, essentially this hijacker process that's now running in the background of our PS5 all the time, even when we're not running the disc player anymore, even though we're not running the WebKit anymore. It's running in the background and it's listening on port 9027 for us to send a payload to it. So let's go ahead and see if this works now. So we're not on the disc player app anymore. There's no elf loader running, or no perceived elf loader running. So all we're going to do now is basically run that particular elf.bat file right here. We're going to double click this. And as you can see, it was successful. Send elf.py. There it goes right there. And there's no error message. Normally, if it failed to send, there'd be a message saying something like, connection refused, or, connection timed out, or something to that effect. But nope, it was sent successfully. So it actually was able to send that elf file to the PS5, even though we're not on a elf loader at the moment. The elf loader is just running in the background with that hijacked Redis process, which is pretty cool. So very exciting stuff. Obviously very early days at the moment. Still a long way to go. We're still, it'll probably be a while before we see some substantial homebrew for the PS5 that uses this method. But the point is, it's out, it's available now, and developers can, start working on this straight away, which is awesome. So yeah, huge stuff there from Astrelsky. We don't really hear much from him that often. I guess I don't think he likes the limelight as much as maybe some of the other devs in the scene, but still very, very impressive stuff from him. And I believe Null Pointer, who was also involved. So anyway, that's basically it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.